What if one woman's quiet courage could shatter a system built to silence her? Picture a single stand against injustice, a moment so raw it unites a nation and reaches the halls of the White House. This is that story: a disabled veteran, a corporate conspiracy, and a fight that redefined dignity for millions. You'll want to stay until the end to see how one voice can rewrite history. Drop a comment below with where you're watching from and what time it is. We'd love to hear from you. The morning was gray, the kind of gray that seeps into your bones and whispers of forgotten promises. Sarah Whitaker sat in her weathered pickup truck outside the Veterans Affairs office in Columbus, Ohio. Her hands rested on the steering wheel, knuckles white, not from fear, but from the constant ache that had become her companion. At 42, Sarah's face still held the sharp edges of youth, but her eyes told a different story. They were the eyes of a woman who'd seen too much: 12 years in the Army, 2 tours in Iraq, and a roadside bomb that stole half her hearing and most of her left leg. Her prosthetic limb, hidden beneath faded jeans, was a daily reminder of survival. But survival, she'd learned, wasn't the same as living. Today was supposed to be simple: a meeting to appeal a glitch in her VA healthcare benefits. For months, her claims for specialized treatment, physical therapy for her chronic pain, a new hearing aid to replace the one that buzzed uselessly in her ear, had been denied. Not because she wasn't eligible, but because the system kept spitting out excuses. Coding errors, they said. File a new claim, they urged. She'd filed 3, each one a battle against a faceless machine. Each time, the response was the same: denied, delayed, or lost. Her savings were nearly gone. Her pain was a constant fire, and the VA's call center was a labyrinth of hold music and hollow promises. This meeting was her last chance to get answers in person, to look someone in the eye and demand what she'd earned. Sarah adjusted her Army veteran cap, the one with the faded 10 1st Airborne patch stitched into the fabric. It wasn't just a hat. It was a piece of her soul, a tether to the woman who'd led convoys through Fallujah, who'd carried a wounded private to safety under sniper fire, who'd screamed orders over the roar of chaos. She stepped out of the truck, her cane tapping the asphalt with a rhythm that matched her heartbeat. The VA building loomed ahead, all glass and concrete, a fortress that felt more like a wall than a sanctuary. The lobby inside was a mix of stale coffee and bureaucracy, the air heavy with the weight of waiting. A receptionist barely glanced up as Sarah checked in. "3rd floor, conference room B," she mumbled, her voice as lifeless as the fluorescent lights overhead. Sarah nodded, her cane clicking against the tile as she headed for the elevator. It was out of service. Again. She sighed, her jaw tightening, and took the stairs instead. Each step was a negotiation between pride and pain, her prosthetic leg protesting, her good knee trembling under the strain. By the time she reached the 3rd floor, her breath came in short, sharp bursts, but her resolve was steel. The conference room was cold and sterile, with a long table that looked more suited to a corporate boardroom than a place meant to serve veterans. 3 VA officials sat across from her, 2 men in cheap suits, 1 woman clutching a clipboard with a forced smile. Their nameplates read Mr. Douglas, Mr. Hargrove, and Ms. Ellison. They didn't introduce themselves. They didn't need to. Their body language screamed authority, the kind that thrived on control, not compassion. "Ms. Whitaker," Douglas began, his voice clipped and hollow, "we've reviewed your file. Unfortunately, your claim doesn't meet the criteria for approval." Sarah's jaw tightened, but her voice stayed steady. "I've submitted the same paperwork 3 times. My doctor signed off on it. The VA's own policy says I'm eligible for advanced therapy and equipment. So why am I here?" Hargrove leaned forward, his tie slightly crooked, his eyes avoiding hers. "The system flagged your claim for review. These things happen. You'll need to resubmit after we..." "Resubmit?" Sarah's voice was calm but sharp, like a blade sliding from its sheath. "I've resubmitted. I've called. I've waited. My hearing's getting worse. My pain's getting worse. And you're telling me to start over?" Ms. Ellison scribbled something on her clipboard, her smile faltering. "We understand your frustration, but our hands are tied. The software determines eligibility, and software." Sarah's cane tapped the floor once, hard, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the quiet room. "You're telling me a computer knows more about my service than I do? I earned those benefits. I bled for them." Douglas's smile was thin, a mask that barely hid his impatience. "We're not questioning your service, Ms. Whitaker, but rules are rules. If you don't comply with the process, we can't help you." Comply? The word hit her like a slap, sharper than the pain in her leg. Sarah leaned forward, her cap casting a shadow across the table, her voice low but unyielding. "I complied when I signed up at 19. I complied when I drove through sniper fire. I complied when I spent 6 months in rehab learning to walk again, when I woke up screaming from nightmares of Fallujah. Don't talk to me about compliance." The room went silent. Hargrove shifted uncomfortably, his chair creaking. Ellison's pen froze mid-stroke. Douglas cleared his throat, his composure slipping. "Let's keep this civil. We're here to help." "Then help," Sarah said, her eyes locked on his. "Fix the error. Approve my claim. I'm not asking for charity. I'm asking for what I'm owed." Douglas exchanged a glance with Hargrove, a flicker of something unspoken passing between them. "We'll escalate your case," Douglas said finally, his tone too smooth, too practiced. "But I need you to sign a waiver agreeing to the standard review process." Sarah's gut twisted, a soldier's instinct kicking in. "A waiver? For what?" "It's routine," Ellison chimed in, too quickly, her voice tight. "Just confirms you understand the delays are due to system limitations, not negligence." Sarah's mind raced. She'd heard whispers from other veterans, waivers that shifted blame, forms that buried claims deeper in red tape, stories of benefits lost forever behind a signature. "I'm not signing anything until I see my file," she said, her voice firm. "All of it. Every note, every denial." Hargrove's face hardened, his patience fraying. "That's not how this works." "Then explain how it works," Sarah shot back, her cane tapping the floor again, a steady beat of defiance. "Because right now, it looks like you're hiding something." The accusation hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. Douglas stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "This meeting is over. You'll hear from us in writing." Sarah didn't move. "I'm not leaving until I get answers." Hargrove leaned in, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "Ms. Whitaker, you're not in a position to make demands. If you push this, you could lose more than just your claim." The threat landed like a punch to her chest. Sarah's heart raced, but her face stayed steady, her soldier's mask in place. "Is that how you treat veterans?" she asked, her voice low, dangerous. "Threaten them when they ask for what's theirs?" Ellison tried to diffuse the tension, her clipboard trembling slightly in her hands. "No one's threatening anyone. Let's all calm down." But Sarah wasn't calming down. She'd faced worse than 3 bureaucrats in a conference room. Enemy fire, shrapnel, the screams of her squad. "I want my file," she repeated, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. "And I want to know why my claim keeps getting denied when I meet every requirement." Douglas motioned to the door, his face flushed with anger. "Security will escort you out if you don't leave voluntarily." Sarah's cane hit the floor again, louder this time. A declaration. "Call them. I'm not afraid of you." The standoff stretched on, seconds ticking by like hours. Finally, Hargrove picked up the phone, his voice tight. "Send security to conference room B." Sarah sat back, her cap still firmly in place, her hands steady despite the storm inside her. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for every veteran who'd been dismissed, every disabled American told to wait, to comply, to disappear. And she wasn't going anywhere. The security guard arrived faster than Sarah expected. He was young, maybe 25, with a buzz cut and a badge that read, J. Carter. His posture was stiff, his hands resting on his belt, but his eyes softened when he saw Sarah's cane and the faded 101st Airborne patch on her cap. "Ma'am," he said quietly, his voice hesitant, "I need you to come with me." Sarah didn't budge, her gaze locking onto his. "I'm here for my healthcare benefits. They're denying me without explanation. You gonna help them do that?" Carter hesitated, his eyes flicking to the three officials. Douglas waved a hand, his voice sharp. "She's disrupting a federal office. Escort her out." Sarah's voice was steady, unyielding. "I serve this country. I'm not the one disrupting anything. They are." Carter's jaw tightened. He'd seen veterans like Sarah before, men and women who'd given everything, only to be stonewalled by the system they'd fought for. His older brother, a Marine, had come back from Afghanistan with scars no one could see, and the VA had turned him away too. "Ma'am, please," Carter said, his voice almost a plea. "I don't want to make this harder." Sarah looked him in the eye, seeing the conflict in his gaze. "Then don't. Stand with me, not against me." The room froze. Carter's hand hovered near his radio, but he didn't call for backup. Instead, he turned to Douglas, his voice low but firm. "She's asking for her file. Why can't she see it?" Douglas's face reddened, his authority challenged. "You don't get to question procedure, kid. Do your job." But Carter didn't move. Something shifted in the air, a quiet rebellion taking root. Sarah felt it, a spark of hope amidst the tension. So did the officials. Hargrove stood, his chair scraping the floor, his voice rising. "This is insubordination. Both of you. Out now." Sarah leaned forward, her cap casting a shadow across her face. "You don't get to silence me, or him," she nodded at Carter, "or anyone else who's tired of this." Ellison tried to regain control, her clipboard now a shield. "Ms. Whitaker, you're making this personal. It's just policy." "Policy?" Sarah's voice rose, not in anger, but in clarity, each word a bullet. "Policy doesn't deny a veteran health care because of a computer glitch. Policy doesn't threaten me when I ask questions. That's not policy. That's a cover-up." The word cover-up hit like a grenade. Douglas's eyes widened, his composure cracking. Hargrove's hands clenched into fists. Carter stepped closer to Sarah, not to escort her, but to stand beside her, his young face set with determination. "I'm not moving her until you answer her questions," he said, his voice steady now. Douglas slammed a hand on the table, the sound echoing through the room. "You're done here, Carter. And you, Whitaker, will regret this." Sarah smiled faintly, a soldier's smile, the kind that had carried her through battles. "I've regretted a lot of things. This won't be one of them." The door swung open again, the hinges creaking under the weight of the moment. Another security guard entered, older, with a limp that matched Sarah's own. His badge read, R. Malone. He took one look at the scene, Sarah in her cap, Carter beside her, the officials fuming, and his face hardened, his eyes narrowing with recognition. "What's going on?" Malone asked, his voice low but firm, carrying the weight of years. Douglas pointed at Sarah, his finger trembling with rage. "She's refusing to leave. Remove her." Malone didn't move. He looked at Sarah, saw the cap, the cane, the fire in her eyes that mirrored his own. "You a veteran?" he asked, his tone softening. 12 years, 101st Airborne, Sarah replied, her voice steady. "You?" "Marines. Gulf War," Malone said, a flicker of camaraderie passing between them. He turned to Douglas, his gaze cold. "She's got a right to be here. What's the problem?" Hargrove exploded, his voice shrill. "The problem is she's disrupting a federal office. Get her out!" But Malone didn't budge. Neither did Carter. Sarah felt the spark inside her ignite into a flame. She wasn't alone anymore. "They're hiding something," she said to Malone, her voice clear. "My claim's been denied 3 times. No explanation. They want me to sign a waiver to cover their tracks." Malone's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening. "That true?" he asked Douglas. Douglas sputtered, his authority crumbling. "This is none of your business." "It's my business when you're screwing over a veteran," Malone said, his voice a growl. He turned to Sarah. "You got proof?" Sarah pulled a worn folder from her bag, copies of her claim forms, doctor's letters, denial notices, all meticulously organized. "It's all here. They won't even look at it." Malone took the folder, flipped through it with a soldier's precision. His face darkened with every page. "This is clean. Why is it being denied?" Ellison tried to intervene, her voice trembling. "It's a system issue, not bull." Malone cut her off, his voice sharp. "I've seen this before. You bury claims to cut costs, don't you?" The accusation landed like a thunderclap. Douglas's face went pale, his hands trembling. Hargrove started to speak, but no words came. Sarah's heart pounded, her suspicions confirmed. A cover-up. Not just her claim, but countless others, buried to save money while veterans suffered. Carter spoke up, his voice shaking but resolute. "My brother's a veteran. He's been waiting 2 years for mental health treatment. Same runaround. Is that part of your system issue too?" The officials were cornered now, their defenses crumbling. Sarah pushed forward, her voice unwavering. "How many veterans are you doing this to? How many claims have you buried?" Douglas stood, grabbing his briefcase, his movements frantic. "This meeting is over." But Malone blocked the door, his frame unyielding. "You're not leaving until you answer her." The tension was electric, the air thick with the weight of truth. Sarah's hands trembled, not from fear, but from the realization of what was unfolding. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every veteran waiting in line, every family struggling to pay medical bills, every voice the VA had ignored. Then, a knock at the door, sharp and deliberate. Another figure entered, a woman, mid-50s, with graying hair pulled back tightly and a sharp blazer that spoke of authority. Her badge read, Doctor. Elaine Harper, Virginia Oversight Committee. Her presence shifted the room like a cold wind, her eyes scanning the scene with a quiet intensity. "I was passing by," she said, her voice calm but commanding, cutting through the chaos. "Mind telling me why 2 security guards and a veteran are holding a standoff in my building?" Sarah spoke first, her voice steady despite the ache in her body. "They're denying my healthcare claim without cause. They threatened me when I asked for my file, and I think they're burying claims to cut costs." Harper's eyes narrowed, her gaze shifting to the officials. "Is that true?" Douglas stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. "This is a misunderstanding. We're following protocol." Harper held up a hand, silencing him. "Save it. I want Ms. Whitaker's file, now." Ellison hesitated, her hands shaking as she handed over a tablet. Harper scrolled through it, her face tightening with every swipe, her lips pressing into a thin line. "This claim is textbook eligible," she said, her voice cold. "Why was it denied?" No one answered. Harper turned to Sarah, her expression softening slightly. "You've got my attention. Keep talking." Sarah took a deep breath, her body screaming with pain but her mind clear. "It's not just me. Veterans across this state, maybe the country, are getting denied. Mental health, prosthetics, pain management. We're told it's system errors, but it's deliberate. They're saving money at our expense." Harper's jaw clenched, her eyes flashing with something between anger and resolve. That's a serious accusation. It's a serious crime, Sarah said, her voice unyielding, and I'm not leaving until someone answers for it. Malone nodded, his voice low. I've got buddies who've been through the same. Claims vanish, appeals get lost. It's not random. Carter added, his voice thick with emotion. My brother tried to get therapy for PTSD. They kept saying, wait. He almost didn't make it through last winter. Harper's eyes softened, but her voice stayed firm, a commander addressing her troops. Ms. Whitaker, do you have evidence? Sarah handed over her folder, her hand steady despite the exhaustion creeping in. Start here, then talk to other veterans. You'll find the pattern. Harper took the folder, her expression grim as she flipped through the pages. This office is now under review, she announced, her voice echoing with authority. No one leaves until I get answers. Douglas tried to protest, his voice cracking. You can't. Sit down, Mr. Douglas. Harper cut him off, her tone leaving no room for argument. You're not in charge anymore. Sarah felt a surge of hope, but it was tempered by the weight of exhaustion. Her leg throbbed, her ears rang, but she wasn't done. Not yet. As Harper began questioning the officials, Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from her friend Maria, another veteran. Heard you're at the VA. What's going on? Sarah typed back with trembling fingers. Fighting for all of us. Tell the others. Maria didn't waste a moment. She called her brother Marcus, a former Marine who ran a local veteran support group. Marcus, a broad-shouldered man with a prosthetic arm and a voice that could command a room, drove straight to the VA, calling others along the way. By noon, a small group had gathered outside the VA building. Not a protest, but a vigil. Veterans, their families, even a few local workers who'd heard the story through whispered conversations at the diner down the street. They stood quietly, their presence a silent demand for justice. Inside, the conference room had become a battlefield of words. Harper grilled the officials, pulling files, cross-referencing data with the precision of a surgeon. Sarah sat quietly, her cap a silent symbol of her resolve. Carter and Malone stayed by her side, their presence a shield against the officials' fading authority. Then, a commotion outside. The door burst open, and Maria rushed in, her eyes blazing with determination. Behind her were 3 more veterans. Marcus, a man in his 60s named Henry, who leaned on a walker, and a young woman named Tara, her face etched with the quiet pain of survival. Maria's voice was fierce. We're here for Sarah, and for every veteran you've screwed over. Harper didn't flinch, her gaze steady. You're all welcome. Tell me your stories. The room filled with voices, each one a thread in a tapestry of betrayal. Henry spoke of waiting years for knee surgery, his voice trembling with the memory of sleepless nights. Tara, her hands shaking, described being denied mental health care after surviving a sexual assault during her service, her words raw and unfiltered. Marcus, his prosthetic arm gleaming under the fluorescent lights, shared how he'd sold his car to pay for medication the VA wouldn't cover, his voice breaking as he spoke of his daughter's worried eyes. Each story was a wound, each veteran a warrior still fighting a war they thought they'd left behind. Sarah listened, her heart heavy with the weight of their pain, but her resolve unbreakable. This wasn't just her fight anymore. It was theirs. And it was growing. By late afternoon, the group outside had swelled to hundreds. Veterans from across Columbus, drawn by phone calls, letters, and word of mouth, passed through church groups, VFW halls, and barbershops. A local pastor arrived, leading a small group of parishioners who'd heard of Sarah's stand during morning service. A teacher brought her high school history class, their notebooks open, their eyes wide with the realization that history wasn't just in books. It was happening right here. They didn't shout. They didn't need to. Their presence spoke louder than any protest. Inside, Harper's investigation was uncovering more than anyone had expected. A hidden memo, buried in the office's records, revealed a deliberate strategy to prioritize cost efficiency over claim approvals. Denials weren't errors, they were policy, a cold calculation to save money while veterans suffered. Harper's voice was ice as she read the memo aloud, her hands steady but her eyes burning. This isn't just negligence, this is systemic betrayal. Sarah's phone kept buzzing, messages from strangers pouring in. Thank you for standing up. You're fighting for my dad. Don't give up. She didn't plan to, but the weight of it all was heavy. Her pain flared, her hearing aid buzzed, distorting the voices around her. She hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, but she couldn't stop now. Harper finally looked up from the tablet, her face a mask of controlled fury. This goes deeper than Columbus. I'm escalating this to the National VA office. Douglas tried one last defense, his voice weak. You can't prove intent. Harper's eyes were steel. I don't need to prove intent to suspend you. You're done here. The room exhaled, a collective release of tension. Malone clapped Carter on the shoulder, a quiet gesture of pride. Maria hugged Sarah tightly, tears in her eyes. You did this, Maria whispered. Sarah shook her head, her voice soft. We did this. But the fight was far from over. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Harper made a call to Washington, her voice steady. We have a crisis, and it's not just local. I need auditors, investigators, the works. Outside, the crowd wasn't leaving. They stood in the cold, their breath visible in the air, their signs steady. Healthcare is our right. Stop betraying veterans. Stand with Sarah. A local Vietnam vet named Clara, her gray hair tied back with a scarf, began passing out coffee from a thermos she'd brought, her hands trembling, but her smile warm. We're not going anywhere, she told a young reporter, her voice firm. Not until Sarah gets what she deserves. Sarah stepped outside to address the crowd, her cane steady, her cap proud. The air was cold, but the faces before her warmed her more than any fire could. This isn't about me, she said, her voice carrying over the murmurs, her words raw with emotion. It's about every one of us who's been told to wait, to sign a form, to give up. We're not giving up anymore. The crowd responded, not with cheers, but with a quiet, powerful hum of agreement, a sound that vibrated through the pavement. Veterans saluted, their hands trembling with age or injury. Families nodded, their eyes glistening with tears. The teachers' students wrote faster, their pencils scratching against paper, capturing the moment for posterity. Rachel Nguyen, a young lawyer who'd heard of Sarah's stand through a veterans support group, arrived just as Sarah finished speaking. She'd driven 2 hours from Cincinnati, her briefcase clutched tightly, her heart racing with purpose. Ms. Whitaker, she said, breathless. I'm a veterans advocate. I want to help you take this to court. Sarah blinked, the weight of the day pressing down on her. Court? This isn't just a VA issue, Rachel said, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. This is a civil rights violation. We can sue for systemic discrimination, force a federal investigation. Sarah hesitated. A lawsuit sounded huge, overwhelming, a mountain she wasn't sure she could climb. But then she looked at the crowd, at Maria, at Marcus, at Henry and Tara and Clara, at the faces of those who'd shared their stories and stood in the cold for her, for all of them. Okay, she said, her voice firm, let's do it. Rachel wasted no time. By evening, she'd contacted a national veterans advocacy group and a disability rights organization. Her phone calls urgent but precise. They agreed to co-sponsor a class action lawsuit against the VA, naming Sarah as the lead plaintiff. The news spread not through hashtags or live streams, but through the old ways. Phone calls, letters, meetings in church basements, and VFW halls. Veterans wrote to their local papers, sharing their stories of denied claims and broken promises. Families gathered in living rooms, passing around petitions, their voices rising in quiet determination. The next morning, the VA building was surrounded, not by hundreds, but by thousands. Veterans from neighboring states had driven through the night, their pickup trucks and minivans lining the streets. A group of nurses from a local hospital arrived, their scrubs still on, their faces set with resolve. A high school band, led by a teacher who'd served in the Navy, played Sweet Caroline on the sidewalk, the notes a quiet tribute to the veterans who'd gathered. The crowd was peaceful but unyielding, their signs multiplying. No more excuses. Fix the VA now. Sarah speaks for us. Inside, Harper and a team of federal auditors had taken over the conference room, their voices low but urgent as they sifted through records. Sarah sat with Rachel, reviewing legal documents, her head spinning, but her focus unwavering. Mariah and Marcus stayed close, coordinating with the crowd outside, ensuring everyone had water, blankets, a place to sit. Then, a new figure arrived. Congressman James Callahan, a former Army captain who'd lost a leg in Afghanistan. He walked into the VA building with a limp that mirrored Sarah's, his eyes burning with a fire that hadn't dimmed since his days in uniform. "Ms. Whitaker," he said, shaking her hand, his grip firm. "I'm here because of you. Congress is watching, and we're not staying silent." Sarah was stunned, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is moving too fast." Callahan smiled, a soldier's smile full of grit and hope. "That's what happens when truth meets courage. You've got the country's attention now." He wasn't wrong. By noon, national news outlets had descended on Columbus, their vans clogging the streets. A local reporter interviewed Clara, the Vietnam vet with the thermos, her voice steady as she spoke of her husband's struggles with the VA before he passed. Another reporter spoke to Tara, who shared her story of surviving assault, her words raw and unfiltered, a testament to the pain the VA had ignored. The stories aired that evening, reaching millions, their impact rippling across the nation. Rachel's phone rang constantly. Lawyers, activists, even a White House aide, her voice urgent. "They're talking about an emergency session," she told Sarah, her eyes wide. "Your lawsuit could force a federal overhaul." Sarah shook her head in disbelief, her hands trembling. "All I wanted was my hearing aid." Maria laughed, her voice warm. "And now you're changing the world." But the pressure was mounting. Sarah's pain flared worse than ever, a fire that burned through her leg, her back, her soul. Her hearing aid buzzed, distorting the voices around her, turning conversations into a chaotic hum. She hadn't slept in 36 hours, hadn't eaten more than a granola bar Maria had forced into her hand. Leah, her sister, arrived from Dayton, rushing to her side, her nurse's instincts kicking in the moment she saw Sarah's pale face. "You need to rest," Leah said, her voice firm, her hands gentle as she checked Sarah's pulse. "I can't," Sarah said, her voice hoarse. "Not yet." Leah took her hand, her eyes fierce with love. "You're not alone anymore. Let us carry some of this." Sarah nodded, tears stinging her eyes. She wasn't used to leaning on others, had always been the one to carry the weight, whether it was a wounded soldier in Iraq or her family after her father passed. But as she looked at Rachel, Maria, Marcus, Callahan, and the thousands outside, she realized she didn't have to carry it alone. That afternoon, Callahan addressed the crowd from the VA steps, his voice booming over the murmurs, his prosthetic leg a silent testament to his own battles. "Sarah Whitaker didn't ask for this fight," he said, his words raw with emotion. "But she's shown us what courage looks like. This isn't just about one woman or one claim. It's about every veteran who's been betrayed by the system we swore to serve." The crowd roared, not in anger, but in unity, their voices a chorus of defiance and hope. Sarah watched from a folding chair, her cane across her lap, her body screaming for rest, but her heart full. She felt the weight of their stories, their pain, their resilience. It was bigger than her now, bigger than any one person. Harper emerged from the building, her face grim but resolute, her blazer wrinkled from hours of work. "We've found evidence of widespread claim suppression," she announced, her voice carrying over the crowd, her words heavy with truth. "Not just here, but in VA offices across 6 states. This is systemic." The crowd gasped, a collective intake of breath. Reporters surged forward, their microphones extended. Rachel whispered to Sarah, her voice trembling with excitement. "This is it. The lawsuit's going to blow the lid off." Sarah nodded, her voice soft but firm. "Good. Let it." By evening, the VA's national director issued a public apology on the evening news, his voice hollow as he promised immediate reforms. But the crowd wasn't satisfied with promises. They wanted action, and they stayed, their vigil stretching into the night, their determination a beacon in the darkness. Sarah's lawsuit was filed the next day, backed by thousands of veterans' testimonies, each one a story of betrayal, each one a demand for justice. The case, Whitaker versus Department of Veterans Affairs, became a rallying cry, its name whispered in VFW halls, written on signs, shared in letters to lawmakers. Veterans across the country began gathering their own evidence, their own stories, sending them to Rachel in envelopes stained with coffee, tears, and hope. Over the next week, the movement grew, not through the internet, but through the power of community. Protests, peaceful but firm, sprang up at VA offices nationwide. Veterans standing shoulder to shoulder with their families, their neighbors, their friends. In a small town in Kentucky, a group of veterans held a candlelight vigil outside their local VA, their voices raised in a hymn of solidarity. In Chicago, a diner owner who'd served in Vietnam turned his restaurant into a meeting place for veterans, his tables covered with petitions, his walls plastered with photos of those the VA had failed. In Seattle, a group of nurses organized a march, their signs demanding care, not cuts, their footsteps echoing through the streets. Sarah's story reached beyond veterans, touching the hearts of disability rights groups who saw in her fight a mirror of their own struggles. A coalition of advocates joined the movement, their voices adding to the chorus, their stories of denied care and broken systems weaving into Sarah's own. The Briggs Bill, a law inspired by a similar fight years earlier, was cited as precedent, its legacy a reminder that change was possible. Lawmakers began drafting the Whitaker Act, a federal law to mandate transparency, accountability, and mandatory approvals for eligible VA claims, its pages a testament to the power of one woman's stand. Sarah's life changed overnight. She was no longer just a veteran from Ohio. She was a symbol, a voice, a spark that had ignited a fire. Reporters camped outside her modest ranch house, their notebooks open, their cameras rolling. Veterans sent letters, their handwriting shaky but their words fierce with gratitude. A young girl from Texas sent a drawing of Sarah in her cap, a superhero cape trailing behind her. The words, "Thank you for my daddy," scrawled in crayon. But the attention was exhausting. Sarah's pain worsened. Her hearing faded further, each day a battle against her own body. Leah stayed by her side, managing her care, forcing her to eat, to sleep, to breathe, while Rachel handled the legal front, her briefcase a shield against the chaos. Then, 10 days after the standoff, a call came from Washington. The White House wanted Sarah to meet the president, not alone, but with her team. Rachel, Maria, Marcus, Callahan, and a dozen veterans who'd stood with her from the start, their faces etched with the same determination that had carried them through wars and betrayals. The flight to D.C. was surreal, the hum of the plane a quiet backdrop to Sarah's thoughts. She sat by the window, her cap on, watching the clouds drift by like memories. Leia squeezed her hand, her voice soft. You nervous? Sarah smiled faintly, her eyes tracing the horizon. I faced mortars. I can handle a meeting. The White House was quieter than Sarah expected, its halls lined with portraits of leaders past, their eyes watching as she rolled forward, her cane tapping a steady rhythm. The Oval Office door opened, and the president greeted her with a handshake and a nod, his presence warm but grounded. Ms. Whitaker, he said, his voice steady. You've done what few can. You've forced us to look in the mirror. Sarah nodded, her throat tight. I just wanted my benefits, sir. But I couldn't let others keep suffering. The president gestured to a leather-bound folder on his desk, its pages crisp with purpose. This is the Whitaker Act, he said, his voice carrying the weight of the moment. It's being fast-tracked through Congress. It will ensure no veteran or disabled American is ever denied their rights because of system errors again. Sarah's throat tightened, her hands gripping the arms of her chair. And the VA? We're auditing every office, he said, his eyes meeting hers. Heads will roll. But more importantly, systems will change. You've made that possible. Rachel spoke up, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. This isn't just about policy. It's about trust. Veterans need to know their country has their back. The president nodded, his expression solemn. You're right. And we're starting here. He signed an executive order directing immediate funding for VA claim processing and mandatory training for staff, his pen moving with deliberate strokes. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment, a quiet promise sealed in ink. Then he turned to Sarah, his voice soft but firm. Would you address the nation? Sarah hesitated, her heart racing. Public speaking wasn't her strength. She'd always been the one to act, not to speak. But she thought of the veterans waiting, the families struggling, the voices silenced too long. Yes, she said, her voice steady. In the Rose Garden, a podium waited, the air cold but the crowd warm with anticipation. Veterans, lawmakers, activists, families. They stood together, their faces a mosaic of hope and resilience. Sarah stepped forward, her cane steady, her cap proud, the wind brushing against her face like a whisper of encouragement. She adjusted the microphone, her hands trembling but her voice strong. I didn't start this to be a hero, she began, her words raw, unfiltered. I started it because I was tired. Tired of waiting, tired of being ignored, tired of watching my brothers and sisters suffer. She paused, scanning the faces before her, seeing not just a crowd, but a family. I'm a veteran, but I'm also a daughter, a sister, a neighbor. And like all of you, I just wanted what was fair. The crowd listened, rapt, their breath visible in the winter air. This fight isn't about me, Sarah continued, her voice rising with conviction. It's about the Marine who can't get therapy for PTSD, the soldier who waits years for surgery, the family who loses everything because the VA said, wait, we're done waiting. Applause rose, steady and strong, a wave of sound that carried across the garden. Sarah's voice softened, but her words grew heavier. The Whitaker Act is a start, but it's not the end. We need accountability, not promises. We need systems that serve, not systems that save pennies at our expense. And we need a country that says to every veteran, every disabled person, every citizen, you are seen, you are heard, you are enough. The crowd stood, saluting, clapping, crying, their hands raised in a silent vow. Sarah looked at Leah, Rachel, Maria, Marcus, their eyes shining with pride, their faces a mirror of her own resolve. This isn't my victory, Sarah said, her voice breaking with emotion. It's ours. And it's for every person who's ever felt invisible. We're not invisible anymore. The applause echoed across the garden, across the nation, a sound that reached beyond the walls of the White House, into the hearts of those who'd waited too long to be heard. News outlets carried her speech live, their anchors falling silent as her words filled the airwaves. In homes across America, veterans watched with tears in their eyes, their families holding them close, their hope rekindled. Back in Columbus, the VA office was transformed. New leadership took over, their voices softer, their actions swift. New systems were put in place, their processes transparent, their purpose clear. Sarah's lawsuit settled out of court, with the VA agreeing to process all backlogged claims and pay restitution to affected veterans, their checks arriving with letters of apology, their dignity restored. The Whitaker Act passed Congress 3 months later, signed into law before a crowd of thousands, its pages a testament to the power of one woman's stand. Sarah returned home, quieter now, but no less determined. Her hearing aid was finally approved, its new hum a comfort rather than a burden. Her therapy was funded, her pain easing with each session, her body slowly healing as her spirit had. But she didn't stop. She joined Rachel's advocacy group, traveling to small towns and big cities, speaking at VFW halls, churches, schools. She met with veterans, listened to their stories, carried their voices forward, her cap a constant companion, a symbol of her promise. One evening, months later, Sarah sat on her porch, the sun dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Her cap rested on the table beside her, its patch faded, but its meaning eternal. Leah brought her a coffee, her smile soft as she sat beside her. "You changed the world, you know," Leah said, her voice warm with pride. Sarah smiled, her eyes tracing the horizon, her heart full. "I just wanted to be heard." "And now," Leah said, her hand resting on Sarah's, "the whole world's listening." But the impact of Sarah's fight stretched beyond the laws she'd inspired, beyond the systems she'd changed. In a small town in Montana, a veteran named Daniel, who'd given up on his claim years ago, received a letter approving his surgery, his hands trembling as he read the words, his wife crying beside him. In Atlanta, a young woman named Keisha, who'd served in Afghanistan, walked into her local VA office with her head held high, her claim approved on the spot, her smile a mirror of Sarah's own. In a classroom in Oregon, a teacher told her students about Sarah Whitaker, her voice steady as she spoke of courage, of dignity, of the power of one voice, her students listening with wide eyes, their hearts open to the lesson. Sarah's story became a beacon, a reminder that change doesn't come from those in power, but from those who refuse to be powerless. Veterans began organizing, their voices rising in town halls, their stories shared in letters to lawmakers, their demands clear. No more waiting, no more excuses, no more betrayal. Disability rights groups, inspired by Sarah's stand, pushed for broader reforms, their voices joining the chorus, their fight for dignity a mirror of her own. And in Washington, the Whitaker Act became a foundation, a stepping stone for further change. Lawmakers, moved by the stories of veterans like Sarah, began drafting new legislation, their pens moving with purpose, their hearts open to the lessons of her fight. The VA, once a symbol of betrayal, became a symbol of redemption, its offices filled with new faces, new voices, new promises kept. Sarah Whitaker didn't set out to be a hero. She set out to be heard. But in her quiet courage, her unyielding resolve, she became something more. A spark that lit a fire, a voice that broke the silence, a woman who reminded a nation what it means to truly serve. Her fight wasn't just for veterans, but for every person who'd ever been told to wait, to comply, to disappear. And in her victory, she gave them something greater than a law. She gave them hope. This isn't just Sarah Whitaker's story. It's a reminder that one voice, one stand, one moment of courage can ripple across a nation, across generations. It's a call to every veteran, every citizen, every person who's ever been told their worth is negotiable. Your voice matters. Your fight matters. Your dignity is non-negotiable. For our viewers, whether you're young or old, veteran or civilian, this story is for you. It's a testament to what happens when we stand together, when we refuse to let injustice win. If Sarah's courage moved you, if it reminded you of someone you know, or if it inspired you to believe in the power of one voice, please like this video, share it with the world, and subscribe to our channel. Let's keep this movement alive. Tell us in the comments, what does dignity mean to you? Who's inspired you to stand up? And let's show the world that no one, no veteran, no citizen, no human should ever be silenced. Thank you for watching.